So, what's been your experiences of America?
Well, let me think. The first time I ever came to the States, I was probably about 30. I wasn't young.
Hmm.
But a friend, it's a funny little story, actually. A friend of mine knocked on my door, very close personal friend, and his wife had left him that day. And he said, I want to go away to let it, to sort of overcome this mental anguish he was suffering. So he said, let's go and have a party time. So I thought, okay, I could take a bit of leave from work. So I took 2 weeks off work, and we went and looked at potential venues to kick back for a bit. And I think it was December, so we looked at Tunisia and places like that would be warm, and they were all a bit meh. So we ended up going to Texas of all
Mm.
places. We flew into Dallas because it was literally £120 return flight from London to Dallas Fort Worth Airport. And we had no plans at all. We just picked up a car and went on a 2 week drive around Texas and the various, sort of, I think we went into Louisiana and Arizona a bit, Nevada, places like that. What a 2 weeks. And I repeated that every year for about 5 years. We used to fly into different parts of the States and just go on holidays. So I've visited quite a few of the States over the years. Um, I think I took my honeymoon in Canada, but we the following year we went down into Oregon and Washington State, and I've been a fair bit on the East Coast. Last year, I think I was in Philadelphia. The year before, I was in Rhode Island. I've been there a few times. That's
Mm.
an interesting place. So I've sort of invested myself in America in a way, and I do love America, but its idiosyncrasies I find quite fascinating. Being a British person, there is much commonality, but we are distinctly very different nations of people as well, I think.
Absolutely. You probably better traveled in America than I am, actually. But I remember before moving here, my parents had lived here before, and I was born here, so that's how I could live here. But before I came and moved here and I was talking to them about it, they were basically trying to put me off it because they just said, the people are so completely different, you won't really understand each other culturally. But they had lived in Alabama, so that's probably as different as you can get from the UK. But I personally really like the South. The first place I came to was Nashville, Tennessee, and I felt very at home there. And then I lived in LA for the first couple of years, which was fun. It's not all that it's cracked up to be with, the beaches and convertibles, and there is that, but there's also a lot of stuff that's just very unpleasant. And I remember going down Hollywood Boulevard for the first time and just thinking, "Oh, is this it? Really?" And I ended up living there for 6 months. So yeah, I was in LA for a long time, and then I decided to move from LA. I'd broken up with my girlfriend at the time, and I knew quite a lot of people in New York. So I thought New York is the place. Good place to go as a single man. But when I got there and I had my apartment, what you could get for the money and the quality of life was just abysmal. And I lived in London for 5 years, which is pretty bad in terms of renting. But New York is even worse. And I remember being in my apartment and thinking, if I stay here any longer, I'm going to kill myself. So I decided I wanted to go and check out a few different cities to see where should I go, because I could work from anywhere. I didn't really have particular ties to one city, so I was kind of starting from scratch. And a friend of mine had lived in Chicago before, a friend of mine from LA. And she said, "Look, I know you pretty well. Just go there for a few days, just try it." And I did, and I viewed about 12, 13 apartments in that time. And the apartments that I looked at for less money than I was paying in New York, it was like in New York, they would show you around this apartment and it's like a Romanian jail cell with like excrement on the walls and complimentary rats gnawing at your toes. And then I came to Chicago and every single apartment was like the Palace of Versailles for the same price. And I thought I'd have to be pretty dumb. There'd have to be something incredible in New York to keep me there. And I also found, I don't know how many times you've been to New York, but I found that recently it has gone a bit downhill. I don't want to get too much into the local politics, but in terms of the safety and the cleanliness of the city, I thought it was much worse than when I'd visited before. So overall, I just wasn't enjoying it.
No. I mean, by far my favorite experiences in America, the US, have always been in smaller towns
Mm.
where I enjoy meeting, real nuts and bolts American guys, not the sort of cultural intelligentsia in the big cities, but the ordinary folks like myself who are just ordinary people grinding through life and have got a different view of life. I mean, and one of the things, and I'm sure you get this in the States, when you go into a bar and you order a drink and people hear your accent, you
Mm.
get treated like a little bit of a rock star, don't you? I remember going into a bar in Albuquerque in New Mexico, and so I ordered it. I always used to put it on a little bit. I will admit, I sort of suddenly became Hugh Grant when I was in America. I'd leave my colloquial Welsh accent behind when I was in the States. And, I'd make sure everybody in the room heard me ordering my gin and tonic, particularly the attractive women, of course. And, a night, and I remember that night particularly because it turned into a wedding proposal a short while after. But, that's one of the things I did enjoy about the States. But by and large, my favorite experiences were in smaller towns where
Hmm.
you got to see the real Americana of life, not the cities. I mean, like I was saying to you earlier, I was in Philadelphia last June at a friend's wedding, and yeah, I was a police officer for 23 years in the UK in some big cities, and it felt, you get a sixth sense about, the sort of level of safety on the street. It didn't feel entirely comfortable all the time for me.
Hmm.
I certainly wouldn't have been wearing an expensive watch on the street or anything like that. And that kind of blunts the enjoyment of your life, I think, when you've got to live under those circumstances. But like you say, without getting into the politics of it, there's a lot going on in the world, and America is the largest economy in the world. Sometimes it isn't evident when you're walking around the streets, is it?
No, not at all. I think America has its extremes more where in LA you notice this because you can just drive around LA and you can drive Sunset Boulevard, which is about 30 miles long, and you'll see every extreme of wealth and inequality and poverty just on that single road. One thing that I remember before I moved here, my dad said to me was, bear in mind in America, there are some places in a particular city that you just don't go to. There are some areas you just don't go. And coming from the UK, I thought, wow, this can't be that bad because even in London, you can walk around the most infamous parts of the East End or wherever and you're fine, really. Whereas in America, it really is true. There are certain parts. And I love Chicago, and you can walk around the part that I'm in River North or downtown, and it's so clean. You don't see any litter even on the street. Everyone's respectable, well-dressed. You never see any trouble. But obviously, I know that if I go 2 miles south, there's going to be a huge area where you just don't go. And there's that segregation in America still.
Yeah, yeah, it's very different in many ways to the UK. We're still a bit conservative, I think, aren't we, over here, and a little bit more old-fashioned, perhaps. But that's the charm of it.
It's funny that you mention your accent because one of the first things I noticed when I started watching your videos was this guy's from South Wales, because I grew up in Swansea from the ages of 10 to 18. I lived in Swansea, in Mumbles, if you know it.
Know it well. Know it well.
Yeah, yeah. So I was wondering what part of the world you were from.
So I'm from a sort of an old mining town called Aberdare. Which is
Aberdare,
about,
okay.
yeah, it's about
Yeah.
27 miles from Swansea. And in fact, my parents, who now live in the same village as me in Somerset, they used to go to Swansea every Saturday afternoon to go shopping, and then
yeah.
to go down to the beach, and enjoy the beautiful Gower Peninsula. It was spectacular. I loved visiting it myself. Lovely place.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It's kind of like California, but with very bad weather. I remember, I think you could normally go on the beach maybe twice a year, and then it would rain and be horrendous the rest of the year.
Yeah, but it's still, beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
No sharks.
There's no sharks, that's true, and less traffic. So your channel is called The Chap's Guide. What to you is a chap? I'm sure you get this question a lot.
I do, because I don't know whether I chose it as a abbreviated version of gentleman, really. I mean,
Hmm.
gentleman it's kind of got a delineating tone to it. A lot of people assume that to be a gentleman, you have to be a certain class, or that you have to be born into it, which I think might have been the case, maybe in the last century to a degree. But for me, a chap is just a shortened version of gentleman, which is perhaps more accessible to ordinary person. I originally intended the channel to be called the Chap's Guide to Life, but it was a bit long, so I thought I'd call it Chap's Guide. And although I get asked that question a lot, because I don't know if the term chap is equally as sort of used in vernacular as it is in the States as it is here in the UK. Probably not. But that's where I intended it as. So hopefully that's how people receive it.
Absolutely, yeah. And where did your original interest in this arena of topics come from? Was it the style first? Was it gentlemanly behavior? Grooming? Was there one particular thing that you began with?
Well, in general, for me personally,
Yeah.
I mean, growing up I'm 54, right? So, I'm from an era which there were still well-dressed men around the streets when I was growing up. And my sort of earliest influence would have been my father, who's 93, still lives down the road
Oh,
from me, still doesn't leave the house without wearing a necktie. All right. So if I
really?
take him, he
Wow.
had to stop driving a couple of years ago because his eyesight's deteriorated. But if I take him and my mother shopping, even if it's to Tesco's, he's wearing a necktie because that is a standard, shaves every day. That's a standard that was set by people of that era. My father was a soldier. He was in the British Army, conscripted into the army in 1949. So you're talking about very much a generation where appearance was part of, your character. So I saw that with my father when I was young. I saw my father wearing a tie going out. We would never go out without dad looking right.
Mhm.
And I was dressed accordingly as a young kid. And then when I grew a bit older, as a younger man, I joined the Air Cadet organization. So I was in a youth body which had a uniform. So I started to appreciate the value of dressing to make an impression on other people. I went to a school which wore a uniform, tie, blazer, all that sort of thing. So again, I was always surrounded by what people would call today formality of attire, but to us it was just normal. Then at 17, I enlisted in the military, proper, joined the RAF. So I was then exposed to the next tier of the importance of dressing well. That your clothing, your uniform, is a representation of the body which you're a part of. So, you dress well because you want your organization to be seen positively by contemporaries or peers or whatever. And within that, your own appearance, then, I wouldn't say it's competitive, but, if you had the shiniest shoes, the sharpest crease in your trousers, you'd be considered to be a smart airman. It would be reflected on your annual reports. It affects your career. So that's kind of the early life in which I was exposed to the importance of dressing well and the power, I think, which is what I try to sort of convey to people a lot. If you dress well in this modern era in which people do not, you have a minor superpower when you're going for jobs, when you're seeking to get a service from other people. If you're dressed well, you've got an advantage over the people who aren't. And that's kind of the path which I have followed.
Hmm. There are very few careers these days in which dressing well is a required part or even seen as something that would improve your career. Because I remember thinking as a young man, well, I don't really want to wear sweatpants to work like I see the people in advertising do, or even journalists dress like crap for a large part. But there aren't many careers aside from law, maybe being a doctor, where a suit and a tie is kind of the uniform still. Aside from the military, because I've noticed that a lot of people who are into this genre of YouTube that we make are from the military. I'd say there's quite a high proportion of ex-military people who are interested in this. And it makes sense when you explain about the crease in the trousers and the shininess of the shoes, why they still have that interest and they've carried it over to civilian life.
Oh no, you're right. I mean, even in my career, I mean, I was in the military for 10 years. When I joined, we wore, a full blue uniform with a collar and black tie. That was your daily working wear. Today, people in the military wear just combat garments because my job today,
Mm.
I work for a military charity and I deliver well-being training to serving as well as veteran military personnel. So I go on military camps. I meet personnel today and they're just wearing, effectively combat jackets. They don't even have to shave anymore. All of the British forces now, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, they can have facial hair. So
Hmm.
when I was in the military, everybody was shaven.
Right.
I joined the police. after I left the military, I joined the British Police Service. And when I joined the police service, we wore a white shirt, black tie. You know, it was quite a formal uniform we had. Today, cops wear wicking, sort of sweat-proof sort of clothing, underbody armor. They wear cargo trousers. There's none of the formality, even in professions in the past in which, you know, clothing and appearance was very important. So the degradation of you know, or the sort of increase of casuality in men's style, I think has hit its zenith. I mean, it can't go any lower, because how else can you become more casual than people are to this day? You know, there's no lesser way of dressing that you can employ. So I hope, I sincerely believe, and speaking to people, you know, particularly in London and places like that, in Savile Row, you get the sense that they believe there's a bounce. When you've hit the bottom, you'll bounce upwards. And people tended to dress casually because they liked the fact it made them look different. You know, in professions, you know, like the tech industry was the first to do it, I think. People would previously, in sort of C-suite jobs, would have worn collar and tie, good bespoke suit, whatever. But then Steve Jobs kicked it off and started sort of dressing less formally. And of course, their, you know, acolytes followed, and then it got lower and lower and lower. But then, of course, when everybody's dressed casually, how do you stand out from the crowd? And you start going the other way. And I think that's what we will start to see in the coming generation. It's taken a generation to get this low. I think it'll take a generation, and it'll never return to men wearing bowler hats and things like that. But I definitely think that there is a bounce back coming.
Yeah, it only takes one thought leader to spin the wheel one way, and it only takes another one now to spin it the other way. I haven't seen who that is in the mainstream, but I will say that the interest that my generation has taken in this topic and the interest that I've seen in my channel was much greater than I was expecting it to be. And even out and about in Chicago, I don't know what it's like in the UK. I've not been in the UK for a couple of years, but I've been at bars before, and I'll be wearing a tie because that's just my personal style. And I kind of think I'm standing out a little bit. But then I look around and I'll go, you know, there's 2 or 3 other guys here wearing a tie around my age, and it's Saturday night. They haven't come from work. They're obviously just doing this because they like it and it stands out. So I do think it's possible that we're going to see an upswing of this.
I do. I mean, it's not, I think it's remained sort of constant at the higher end. You know, I think really high quality folks, high value individuals have still dressed very well. I mean, I was in Savile Row talking to William Skinner, actually, the chairman of Gent Skinner, last year at an event, actually, which is repeating itself in the coming week. So I'll be seeing him again this week. And I remember saying to him in his shop, you know, how does the future look for bespoke men's tailoring in an era when nobody seems to dress well? Mm-hmm. And he said to me, "You'd be surprised. You know, we are busier now than we have ever been in the history of our business, because those who can afford the best quality, they come and they spend money on it. It is at the lower end where people were emulating their better dressed sort of contemporaries. That's where it's dropped away. But I sense it's coming back. I mean, I can see it happening."
That makes sense, because I've noticed that for a long time, as a kid growing up, my dad would always wear business suits because he had to. Later in his career, he decided, I don't need to bother with this anymore, and just wore a t-shirt to work. But I noticed that you could probably have a better insight on this than I. But people who wore suits because they had to seldom wore high quality suits. You know, for example, my dad probably never paid more than £300 for a suit. And I'm probably spending 4 times that as a 26-year-old wearing a suit for fun. So I think the people that like suits now, as you said, they're going for the bespoke, they're prepared to pay good money for these. Whereas I can't imagine that, for example, Debenhams or in the US, Macy's are selling too many $400, $500 suits these days.
No, I think you're right. I mean, yeah. And the sad thing of it is of course, that the people we're talking about, they're the people that a suit would do the best for in their appearance, because a suit, you know, the modern man, I mean, let's be honest, the modern man is heavier than he's ever been before, because the sedentary lifestyles, the very calorifically heavy diets that most people have today, you know, people are heavier. They're
Yeah.
larger in their physiques. And a suit is going to be your best friend when it comes to making the best of your appearance. If you look that generation ago, where there simply was the access to high calorie foods and, the lifestyles that we lead today. You look at a mass photograph of 50 men in the 1950s and 60s, there probably wasn't one guy there who was obese. If you
Mhm.
look at that same photograph today, probably 60% of the men in that image from a first world nation like the UK or the USA, the guys would be heavy set. And a suit will do so much more for you than a shapeless garment like a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, sweatpants. It'll give you form, it'll give you a silhouette, it'll make you feel much more self-confident. All of the positivity which comes from wearing good quality clothing is what people desperately want today, because we
Mhm.
hear about well-being being so, detracted in people. They just really don't feel good about themselves, and they're dressing accordingly. Whereas if they dressed in a much more intentionally well dressed manner, they would certainly benefit from it, I think. And there would be a well being lift. The mind follows the appearance quite often. And it's a tragic shame.
I totally agree. I think being well dressed is the most underrated form of self improvement. In terms of bringing up your mood, it's just as impactful as exercising, journaling, meditating. Well, I don't do the latter two, so I can hardly comment. But yeah, I totally agree with you there.
Yeah. And it starts first thing in the morning for me. I mean, I shave every day.
Hmm.
And that ritual, I mean, I get up at 6:15 every day, regardless whether I'm working or not. And I go for my shave. And that sort of ritual of standing there, lathering the brush, shaving, applying shaving balm afterwards, it sets me up for the day. It enhances my mood. Whether or not I've had a bad night's sleep after I've had a shave, I'm ready for anything.
Hmm.
So, and that's where the day begins. Then you get dressed and it's like putting on your suit of armor for the day ahead, isn't it? There's nothing more satisfying than that.
Absolutely. Perhaps you have more insight on this than I do, but I imagine that in the military, the reason that it was so encouraged to have such an impeccable appearance was because they realized the mental benefits that would have on you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I read a very interesting biography just the other day about an old British general, a chap called Brian Horrocks, who was quite a significant leader in the Second World War, and he was writing about his earlier stage of his career, where he talked about when he first took over a large body of men. So he was a battalion commander, a colonel in rank, and he was responsible for about 600 to 800 men. And he said one of the first things he did was crack down on the fact that their appearance was shoddy. And he insisted that his men shaved every day. And the
Mhm.
reason for it was because he said, when you're in a battle, you can't get sleep. It's the most difficult thing to achieve in a combat situation. And what he said, if you shave, it has the invigorating effect of having about 2 hours sleep. The hot water on your skin, the shaving foam, everything like that. And he insisted his men did that because if you can't sleep, at least having a good shave perks you up, gets you ready for whatever you've got to face in the day. And I absolutely subscribe to that ideology. And the military kind of embeds within you. It's a sense of self-discipline, really. I mean, only in basic training do they do it. You're not under sort of horrific discipline on a daily basis. But when you're in the training phases, it is the building blocks, the foundation for the sort of person that you will become. I was a child, legally a child when I joined the armed forces,
Mm.
and it made a man of me pretty quickly. I got to say, it was the best thing that I ever did in my life was to join the British military.
I would love to hear about some other habits and ways that these experiences shape the man that you are today.
Well, I mean, it's just self-reliance, I think, is a really big thing.
Hmm.
So, I've always been somebody who's quite comfortable in my own company. I don't feel the need to be a part of a group or a gang. I'm quite happy to take my own path in life. And that was very much sort of part of the military way, because in the Royal Air Force, a bit different to the British Army, but in the RAF, you moved around as an individual. In the British Army, you tended to move around as a body of people if you were in, a particular battalion or whatever. So the RAF, I would often, you know, stay one place for a couple of years, maybe in the UK. Then I remember being posted. I went to Germany. I was there for 3 years, came back to the UK, went to Belgium, was there for a couple of years. So you get very accustomed to being flexible and versatile, moving around, interacting with people who are not necessarily from your culture, don't speak your language. So from quite an early age, I left when I was about your age.
Hmm.
When I was your age, I had 10 years of military service, traveling around the world, working amongst a group of people who were striving towards a common purpose. And obviously having the noble, uh, overarching reason for your everyday as being you're contributing to the safety of your nation. So it's something which sets you up for life, I think, and it definitely put me on a path. And on an individual, at a little basis, it's things like learning how to polish your shoes, learning how to iron your clothing, to look after your own laundry, to do your own cooking, cleaning, and that is something which I doubt many 20, well, I was 17 when I joined, but when I left, I was 27. I don't think there are many men of 27 who can look after themselves to that level in this modern world. So there is quite a bit you get from that sort of life.
You're absolutely right. It surprises me how often I will go to a friend's house or stay in an Airbnb and I'll say, "Oh, can I borrow your iron?" And they say, "I don't have one." I say, "Well, what do you do with your clothes?" But I wanted to go think about as well when you first joined and you were talking about all these skills that you learned. Were these things that you were already familiar with and were quite easy for you to pick up? And were they easy for the other guys who were joining as well? Or was it kind of a strange experience for you all?
Oh God, no. I mean, I was lucky because I'd been in a youth cadet organization.
Hmm.
I'd worn the same uniform basically, so I understood how it operated. But there were guys, I remember vividly, we were in large dormitories, 24 in a dormitory or whatever. As you imagine these sort of military training environments to be, all your bed, your locker at the side. And I remember I was in a bed space next to a chap who was from the Highlands of Scotland, and he
Hmm.
had been a farmer. And he was a little bit older. I mean, he was probably about 23, but when you're 17, that seems quite old. And he had a terribly thick accent. I could barely understand him, but he couldn't do a tie. He did not know how to tie his tie.
Hmm.
Now, I've been tying a tie since I was 11 because the school I went to, we had a school tie.
Same,
So,
yeah.
wore a school tie. And my father taught me how to tie a half Windsor knot. That was the tie knot which I used for most of my life until I, learned other ones. But this chap, he could not tie a tie. And I had to tie his tie for him every morning. Tried to teach him, but he just couldn't get it on board. He didn't last, actually. He left. He couldn't take the transition into that sort of life. But yeah, it's a big challenge for some people. Um, it must be so much harder now because young folks today, their lives are so gilded compared to even what my childhood was like. I can't imagine how they make that transition.
I totally agree. One thing that I've noticed in the US as well is there are certain traditional things that the school system in the UK will teach you that you don't in the US. So, for example, tying a tie, like you, I had to wear a tie every day from 11 to 16. I actually hated it at the time. As an adult, I refound and improved my relationship with the tie, but I hated it at the time. And same as writing with a fountain pen. Had to write with a fountain pen. You weren't allowed to use a ballpoint pen from probably year 8, so that's about 13, I think, is when it was time to switch to a fountain pen. So that's another thing that I've learned. And when I made videos about it, I realized that a lot of my audience has not actually been exposed to this yet.
No, I mean, as I reach over to the corner of my desk, I don't write with anything other than a fountain pen these days,
Hmm.
more or less. And it's funny, there's a huge niche of people who feel the same. There's obviously quite a large community of us who enjoy that sort of, I would say, the finer things in life. But the larger breadth of the population, it's just over their head, isn't it? And it's, well, who writes these days?
Yeah.
I mean, I was at a book festival yesterday, and I went to a 3-hour horror writing workshop in the morning,
Hmm.
and we were, doing the sort of creative writing exercises. And I was using a fountain pen. I actually used one of these sort of Kaveco, sort of pocket pens, which are very popular and very handy because you can do your fountain pen work on the trot. But other folks, they automatically get their laptops out. And I think, well, for me, very much part of the creative process is using a pen because it's the link between brain and hand. It's so different to typing onto a keyboard that I write all of my notes that I use for my videos longhand in a notebook
Hmm.
because it taps into some more creativity that I do not get when I type onto a screen, and it saddens me. I mean, I've got a 14-year-old son. His handwriting is appalling, as I keep telling him. But, they just don't write. They do not write anymore. And it's sad, really.
Yeah, personally, I save the handwriting for something special because I write all my scripts on my computer. And part of the reason I do that as well is I just get exhausted writing for a long period of time. But then when I want to send a letter or do something with some kind of sentiment behind it, then I feel like the pen is appropriate for that, and the fountain pen particularly, because it slows you down a little, but it makes you think and be a bit more deliberate about what you're writing, and it generally improves your handwriting. Because I definitely had experiences in the past where I remember like sending girlfriends love letters and they're like, I can't read what you've written here.
Well, I mean, the thing is, when you write something by hand, it's inherently personal, isn't it? Because it's in a unique script that only you can replicate. Your handwriting is like a fingerprint, I believe.
It is, yeah.
And it means something. Even if it's terrible handwriting, it means something. It means that somebody took the time and effort to do that. And I very rarely ever receive anything handwritten these days. I do have one or two viewers who I interact with, and they do send me letters.
Right.
And it is an amazing joy to read something which has been written by another human being.
It is, and it makes you much more likely to keep it as well. When I have something handwritten, I think, I can't really throw this away. And it's a shame because with my family being in the UK, often I'll send them for a birthday or Mother's Day or something, I'll send them flowers. And normally it comes with the option you can type some kind of message to them, but it just feels so cold and impersonal.
Yeah, I agree.
So when you came out of the military, how did you find it readjusting to civilian life? And what was it about the police force that seemed like an attractive career to you?
Well, really, I came out of the military. I came out because the military was decreasing. So I was in during the period of the end of the Cold War, basically. Seems like a long time ago now when the Cold War seems to be coming back. But I left in 1997, which seems like a very long time ago. And the RAF, my employer, was it was halving in size. So I was in Belgium at the time, working in NATO in Brussels. And I thought, well, this isn't going to sort of, all the camps I was at were closing down. And I thought, crikey, what can I do now? I'm 27, been in the military. What transferable attributes do I have? So, like many folks in my position do, I joined the police simply because it was an easy transference. It seemed rather similar in that I was joining a body of people striving towards a common purpose with a noble sort of cause behind it. Instead of national security, it would be community safety. And I thought there were many of the skills which I had which were transferable. It wasn't true. I don't think, the military prepares you for law enforcement, and I could transfer my pension as well, which was quite handy. So simple things like that, really. It wasn't, it's not the best job in the world, law enforcement. I enjoyed it. I had a very interesting career. I was a detective for a number of years and worked in other fields. And it stretched me as a person and grew my personality and capability as a man. And I saw things which, nobody would want to see. But I've got a son and I wouldn't want him to go into law enforcement because who needs that trauma? Every day is the people that you meet. It's the worst day of their lives. They've either been the victim of a crime or you're telling them some incredibly bad news. And I was lucky. I'm very mentally strong. I never had any sort of mental health problems as a consequence of my job. But I know many folks did, and I wouldn't wish that on somebody else. And I don't think they pay you enough for that. So whilst I had a good time in the police, and I was able to retire quite early on my pension, it's not quite what it used to be, I don't think. So I wouldn't be recommending it to anybody unless they really had a burning desire to get into law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. How would you feel about your son going into the military if that's what he wanted to do?
He's thinking about it, actually. He's of an age where he's talking about his GCSEs, and he's doing okay in school, but he is quite vocationally minded. So he loves being outdoors. He's a mountain biking nut, and he's very physical, very fit. He's bigger and stronger than me already at 14. And he'd make an excellent soldier, actually. But I'm not going to push him in that direction. But my father was in the military. My family go right back. My great great grandfather was in the Boer War in South Africa.
Wow.
In the First World War, he was in the trenches in Passchendaele and other places like that. So my family's history, I had a couple of uncles in the Second World War. One was killed in Normandy. So, my wife's family, the same. She lost a great uncle in a bomber over Malta. Her grandfather fought in, I think it was Italy and France. So very much, not, I wouldn't say it's a family thing, because we tend to serve periods, not great long careers, and we get the best we can out of it and move on to other things. But if my son turned around and said he wanted to join the army, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. I think it's an incredibly noble path to take. I mean, any job, I think, where you have to swear an oath when you start working there is a job of importance, because it's not just something you're doing for the money. You are doing it for a higher purpose. And, the military, law enforcement in the UK, obviously you swear an oath to the crown. It's more than just a job. It's something else.
Absolutely. And I don't come from a military family, but I've had a lot of interactions with ex-military and current military personnel through this channel. And for a young man, if you're wide-eyed and excited and full of energy, it seems like a great way to see the world and experience things that you wouldn't otherwise get to see.
Yeah, and it gives you a commonality as well with other people who've done the same thing. I know you've met Antonio Centeno.
Yes.
I had a conversation with him probably about 3 years ago. And, the first thing that we picked up on was he'd been in the military. And we had something, we're about, I don't know, I'm probably about 8 years older than Antonio-ish. But, and we're a continent apart. But you have that connection. Last Sunday, I was in London, actually, up at what they call Cavalry Sunday. I've been invited to an event where the cavalry of the British Army have an annual memorial parade. And I was sat amongst all these sort of old soldiers, RAF guy, obviously wearing my RAF regimental tie. So I was a bit of an interloper. But you get chatting to the folks and, they start telling you their war stories. And it feels like a real privilege to be in the brotherhood, to be, even though they take the rip out of my branch because it was their party. But, it's something which it's like a club that you've joined, which is with you for life. And, as I say, it's the best decision I ever took.
Yeah. And I think many men are missing that kind of brotherhood these days. So with your channel, the Chap's Guide, at what point in your life, because I know you started the channel around 3 years ago, but what was it that spoke to you at the time about the idea of starting a YouTube channel and broadcasting your passion?
It was pure accident. At the time, I was very heavily involved in a charity. I was chair of trustees of a charity at the time, and we were seeking to broaden our ability to communicate with people the message. It was a charity which was involved around reducing loneliness and isolation with older people. And one of the ways we looked at was perhaps sharing our message via different platforms like YouTube, because obviously YouTube's free. And because none of us knew how to do it, right? Because I'm not even to this day a very heavy consumer of YouTube. I'm just somebody who passed through it occasionally. If I want to learn how to plug in my printer to the computer, I'd look up a sort of how-to thing. And I was one of the younger folks on the committee, and I said, well, I'll give it a go. So I set up a channel, and I thought I learned the lessons through doing it myself that I can then take across to do the charities thing. So I set up a channel, and I thought, what can I talk about? I've got an interest in men's lifestyle, I would describe it, more than style. And so I set up the Chap's Guide. I imagined it would be just me using that as a platform to learn how YouTube works. And then when I've acquired the skills, transfer that over then, or, set up a channel for the charity, which we did. The charity channel ran for a year, the intended purpose of the project, and it was concluded. We closed it down. But the Chap's Guide thing really drew me in. And, well, I think it'll be 5 years in October this year that I've been doing it. So yeah, it's one of the best things I ever decided to do, actually, because it's exposed me to so many interesting characters, people, that I've met, interacted with, been able to help. I mean, even this coming week, we're recording this on Sunday. On Tuesday, I'm going up to London for a couple of days because there's an annual event in Savile Row. And through the channel, we set up a thing called the Nirvana Club.
Hmm.
Called the Nirvana Club because I always say we're heading to Chap Nirvana on my channel. And, we're all the guys who are around, we're all having a meetup in a pub in London, just off Savile Row. We do that a couple of times a year. So it's a great way of sort of building not just a virtual community, but a physical community. I mean, I've met many of the guys now who are, sort of supporters of my channel in person quite a few times. We had a meet and greet in London on 29th of February, Leap Day. And I think there were about 30, 35, 40 guys from all over the world, the furthest of which had flown in from Alaska to come to the meet and greet that we held in a Kensington Rowing Club. So that has been a real wonderful opportunity to make genuine friends through just me sitting in an empty field expressing my opinions on men's style and other related matters. So isn't it remarkable? I mean, your own experience must be similar. I mean, you've flourished.
It's similar, yes.
Really, you've flourished really quickly. And, you're probably starting to reap these sort of the rewards of what this is all about.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. I've only been doing this about 7 months, and it's been probably actually about the last 6 to 8 weeks that it's really turned into a real life thing as well as an online thing, because I did my first event, a meetup at a bar here in Chicago about 3 weeks ago. And it was one of those where I was sat there with my whiskey in hand on the sofas before anybody else had turned up. And I was just thinking, I'm sure you've had this when you do your first event, you think, is anyone going to come? And then one person comes, and then 2 people come, and then 3 people come. And then it starts being a thing where every time you see a guy walk into the bar wearing a suit and tie, you just go, yeah, it's one of us. And yeah, we had about 15 people to the first one. And it was great because you would never believe that all of these guys had just met each other for the first time. You would think they were friends for years and years and years. But unless I'd done something like that, they probably would have never met each other.
No.
So I'm looking forward. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to the next one. We're doing one June 11th at the same place. And since I started posting about it, we've had people say, please come here, come here, come here, come here. So I want to do one in Miami in a couple of months, but I'm going to be in London in September as well. So I'm hoping to do an event in London as well. Yeah,
we can hook it up. We'll have a doubler.
That would be great. That would be great. I get the sense that you make the trip to London a lot.
Yeah. I'm only 2 hours away on the train, and another one of the benefits of being ex-military is there's a club called the Union Jack Club in London, which you can stay
I know
at.
it. I know it well.
So,
actually,
I spend a lot of time there. I was there last weekend. I'm there day after tomorrow. So it's quite cheap, quite centrally located, and it's a lovely little place. So, but I love going up to London.
I used to live quite close to there because I lived in London Bridge on the South Bank. And my very first job was at a photographer's studio, and they used to actually hire out the Union Jack Club. They used to hire out conference rooms and stuff like that. So yeah, I know it pretty well.
It's great.
my experience of London was a while ago. And at the time I was either a student or just recently not a student. So I was pretty much broke the entire time I lived in London. So it would be cool to go back and have a slightly different experience because I was only window shopping on Savile Row and I was not really eating at any restaurants back then. So it's going to be cool to go back to my old home and see a slightly different side to it.
It is. I mean, like any big city, I mean, even the best city in the world. I think London is probably a contender for that title, to be honest. But, even the best city in the world, it's not much fun unless you've got any money. And like you talk about New York, London's very similar. I mean, if you're broke, you're not going to have a particularly great experience in London. You've got to, enjoy it. And I mean, I just love it. Saying that, though, you can walk around the streets and it's like being in the world's biggest open air museum. because every corner you turn, there's a monument or there's a statue or a free museum. This is the beauty of the UK again, free national museums. It's just one of my favorite places to visit.
I used to walk around so much when I lived there. The last place I lived in Kentish Town, and I would walk all the way from Kentish Town through Regent's Park down into the West End, and it's about an hour and a half walk, but it was just fascinating. It was so enjoyable to walk around. I have to say that's one thing that a lot of American cities don't have is enjoyable places to go on long walks. In Chicago, it's pretty good. You could probably walk around for a couple of hours here and see some interesting stuff. But when I lived in LA, I don't think I ever walked anywhere more than about 10 minutes.
No, it's probably quite hot there as well, isn't it?
It can get too warm. Yeah, it can get too warm.
No, I mean, I think London is one of the few places still that you can walk around and see men who are impeccably dressed. I mean, I often, with a sort of cultured eye as you get, as you see things now, you'll see a chap and you'll know that the shoes he's wearing, they are top end bespoke shoes. The suit, you can tell the cut of a man's suit when he's invested good money in it. You still see the odd fellow wearing a bowler hat. I mean, it's the only place in the world I've seen that lately.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a lot of money in London. I think that is what drives it. I think because places like Savile Row, Jermyn Street, they can only exist because there's so much money in that city that people can afford to spend £5,000 on a bespoke suit, £6,000 on a pair of, George Cleverley shoes or whatever. A lot of dough, but it's represented because when you see these fellows in the street, you think, ooh, that is a sharp suit, sir. And you can really tell.
Do you think there are any other cities or towns in the UK that could lay claim to being stylish or well-dressed?
Well, I was in Brighton the other day, and that's pretty sharp, I got to say. But I mean, because London is so big, it's 10 million people probably now. It's almost the same size as New York, isn't it? But larger because it's obviously doesn't have the constraints of being built on islands. It is such a huge, I mean, it's the epicenter of the whole country. It's the engine house of the nation, isn't it? That's where all the money, all the sort of center of government, royalty, of course, that drives a lot of the interest in sartorial matters. I can't think of any city which springs to mind which is equally as dapper, but then because all roads lead to London, so you don't really need it.
That's true. It's almost a bit of a shame in the UK that London really sucks the talent and interest from everywhere else in the country down there. But when you put it in the context of the US, England is basically the size of a state. So it makes more sense. But in the UK, obviously, we have Birmingham and Manchester, but they just don't really come close in terms of cultural interest or types of people that you'll meet there.
No, I think of those cities as very much as I would think of, say, I don't know, Philadelphia or Houston or somewhere like that. They're engine room cities. They're not culturally superb, but they are where the business of commerce takes place. I mean, Philadelphia, as I said, I don't wish to run the place down, but it's obviously the cradle of America where the Constitution was written and all that sort of thing. But it's a really working class city. It's grinding work. It isn't necessarily particularly cultural, even though it is very cultural for the States, obviously, because its history is there. But it's not evident in the way that you see people conducting their daily activities. Whereas London, of course, it's a Roman city, goes back a very long way. So it's had a long time to build that sort of cultural foundation, which perhaps is less so in the States, of course, being a fairly young country.
It is indeed. I'll actually be going to Scotland for the first time in September as well. I'm going to go up to Edinburgh. And then my dad and I are doing a tour of the Isle of Islay to drink a lot of whiskey.
Edinburgh's
so
nice.
I'll be interested. Yeah, I'll be interested because I know there are some menswear stores up there, and obviously the tweed is a big deal up in Scotland, so I'm intrigued to see what they have up there.
Yeah, I think Edinburgh, if I remember rightly, is the second wealthiest city in the UK per head of the population, so sort of income wise.
Oh, so really? Okay.
That is represented in this, it's quite cultural, quite smart, and obviously capital of Scotland, so you get all of that cultural association as well.
So before we wrap this up, I was watching a video of yours last night that I wanted to dive a little deeper into. It was about how to find a life partner.
Oh, yeah.
And I really enjoyed this video because you shared your personal experience with this, and turns out you found your wife through a very early version of online dating. I would love to know what it was like at that time, because obviously for my generation, dating apps is the number one way that people find a girlfriend or find a date. So could you tell me a little bit about your experiences with the very primitive versions of online dating back then?
Primitive. That's an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, I'll set the scene if you like. So I was
Yeah,
about
yeah.
33. I was living let's have a think, where was I? I was in Wales actually at the time. So I started my policing career in Wales before moving back into England later on. And I bought a home, I settled down, had a cat, I had the full Monty, but I didn't have a life partner. Had a few
Mm.
girlfriends, but never, I'd lived with people, but I'd never taken the next step. But I'd been single for a while since I'd started my new career in law enforcement. And the town I'd moved to was relatively small, not particularly big. And as I was in my 30s, the cohort of my potential partners in that community was very limited. Now, you might think I'm taking a clinical approach to this, right? Love is something that just happens, doesn't it? I don't believe it does at all. All right. This is very much the calculated approach to life here. But I thought to myself, I am not going to meet somebody that I want to meet in this town looking at the age demographic, the location where I am. I've got to take this in hand because life,
Hmm.
good things happen to people that make it happen, right? And I thought, right, okay, I flew to this online dating lark. Didn't even have a computer at that time. It was probably, oh God, I can't remember when it was, the early 2000s ish. But I thought, right, okay, I need to buy a computer anyway. So I bought myself, a Dell computer where the screen was like, as 2 feet thick before they had flat screens. And I joined this site called Udate. All right.
Okay.
So it was like 10 quid to join, very inexpensive. And it was quite open. You could interact with anybody. It was quite, by modern standards, I would suggest it was probably quite innocent
Hmm.
in comparison. I mean, in my job in policing, obviously I encountered many situations which started over such websites. But back in the day I'm talking, it was still fairly innocent. And so I thought I'd give it a go. Uploaded a profile, interacted with a number of ladies, and I arranged two dates, two dates, one day after the other. This was my sort of entry into the digital dating world. I'd interacted with both of these girls a few times. They were within my sort of acceptable profile. Again, I'm not trying to sort of, make this sort of clinical, but they were the right age category. They didn't have children. They were what I was looking for, right, at that stage of my life. The first date I went on, uh, I met the girl in a sort of convenient town between both of our locations. We went for a meal. I got to be honest, I was really nervous. Something I'd never done before. Met a total stranger. Normally you'd have met them beforehand, even if you met them when you were half drunk in a pub and
Hmm.
arranged to meet them afterwards. But meeting a total stranger is quite a big step. It felt like for me anyway. As you say, people probably think this is normal today. But I met this girl. We sat down. We had a meal. The sort of conversation flowed rather well. I mean, the punchline is I married that girl.
Right.
There was a second date, and we were married. We have been married for 17 years. Yesterday, our anniversary was
Oh,
yesterday.
congratulations.
Thank you. The second date I went on was the opposite type of this thing. So this particular girl, she looked quite sporty. She sent me photographs of herself wearing wetsuits, diving, very sort of athletic looking, which was what I followed in my life. I was very much an outdoor active person. Um, I arranged to meet her in Cardiff, actually, capital city of Wales, as you
Hmm.
know. And this girl turned up, and she'd been a bit disingenuous in her way of describing herself because she was considerably larger than the photographs that she had sent me. I would argue perhaps it might have been an entirely different person, but they were certainly taken a few years beforehand, and she had found her way to the pie shop between then and now. And she didn't conduct herself in a particularly merit worthy way, which was not something which endeared her to me. So it was clear within sort of 20 minutes that this was going to be a very short-lived friendship. But I was the gentleman. I paid for the meal. I did everything that
Yes.
we were expected to do. I was quite pleasant and we parted our ways. But yes, so after that state, I thought, I don't know if this is for me, meeting these
Mm.
random strangers like this. As it happened, my wife, now Rachel, she contacted me and said, "Do you want to go out on a second date?" And then it went from there. If that hadn't happened, I don't know. I don't know whether I'd have continued down that path.
Right.
But yeah, it was different times, much more innocent, I think.
Well, I always tell guys to, if you have a bad experience, you just have to brush yourself off and get back in there, because there's always going to be people who, even, I've been on dates and I've never had any horror stories like your one, but I've had plenty of dates where within the first 2 minutes, I think, this isn't really going anywhere, and then you sit through the entire meal and spend $250 on dinner and everything. But, I still have a nice time, but I immediately know that I'm not really going to be attracted to this person.
So, are you single or attached?
Yeah, I'm single. Yeah.
So, do you use online dating as your mechanism to meet?
I do. I use two apps. I use Tinder and Bumble. Bumble I found to be the better one of the two. There's so many apps out there that it can become. It's a little bit too much time, really. It takes a lot of time to manage this. It's not really something you can delegate to somebody either. So I'll pay you $20 an hour to swipe for me. But
I'm curious, how do American women react to your Britishness?
good is the short answer. Good, yeah. It's probably better than being in the UK. Definitely. Yeah, unless unless they've had a bad experience with a British guy before, then they just hate all British guys.
Well, they kind of got this romantic view of Brits, don't they?
They do,
which
yeah.
probably isn't true, but
No.
yeah.
It's not true, but I'm fine with that. So yeah, it's been good, and I've always lived in big cities, so there is a large dating pool, because it's true, like you said, if you live in a very small town and you're looking for somebody in a certain age category, even by my age, 26, if I were looking for a 26-year-old girl in a small town in America, 50-60% of them are going to be married already. Some of them will be divorced already. Whereas in a big city, most women are still single, most women have never been married, have no children, so we're in the same position, really. And Chicago is big enough that there's a lot of people out there. But I also meet people in person as well. I'm not afraid, if I see somebody attractive in the coffee shop or whatever, to go up and say hello. And sometimes it goes somewhere, sometimes it doesn't. But I think you need to use all tools at your disposal.
Oh, definitely. And a suit helps as well.
It does,
it not
yeah.
just instills the confidence within the wearer, but I think it gives confidence to the people you're talking to, that they're talking to somebody, not necessarily somebody of substance. I mean, it's not about, the size of your wallet, but it is about the character. If you're well put together in your attire, it says something about you as a person. And I know I wouldn't react well to a female who was, say, poorly dressed. I mean, it's not. It sounds vacuous to say that you drink in that what somebody is dressed as, and you make an assumption about their personality. But it's all you can see at the beginning, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
You can only see the way that they're dressed until you get beyond that to learn the personality.
Yeah.
But it's the opening gambit, and if you can't be bothered to dress well, it's not going to happen.
It is. And for me personally, I feel okay saying this because I hold myself to this high standard of I'm attracted to women who dress well. For me, that's a big thing. And in terms of a partner, a girlfriend, that would be something that's very important for me. I don't want to walk around looking like this with somebody wearing leggings and sneakers. That would just seem very strange. So yeah, style is important to me, not just because of the physical, but also it does say something about you. And I've noticed that also dressing up, because it's so rare, it's almost like a magnet. I remember reading there's a book called How to Talk to Anyone. And in that, the author talks about a what's it, which is just wearing something on your person that's a little bit intriguing and is a conversation starter. well, dressing like this is in of itself a conversation starter, especially if it's, like a Saturday night and it's obvious you haven't come from work. Not that anybody dresses like this for work anyway these days, but there's obviously some reason that you've deliberately dressed like that. It is a magnet to you, and people will come up to you and ask you, why are you dressed like that? Or, oh, I like your suit, so and so. I think in America as well, people are a bit more extroverted, so people are more likely to speak with strangers. In the UK, people tend to keep to their bubbles a little bit more. So I think it's easier to meet people organically in the US.
I think you're right. I think the females in America as well are much more self-confident, I think, perhaps, than in the UK, who would wait for a man to approach them and engage them in conversation. Whereas in the States, I that's one of the things I liked about visiting America, is that when I was a younger man, perhaps less brimming with confidence than I am as I've grown older, it would be the nice icebreaker if somebody speaks to you rather than you having to, get a bit of spine and go and speak to them. It's very much takes the effort out of it when the lady opens the conversation.
It does, yeah. And normally, as you said, if you order a drink and they hear your accent, that's all it needs for the conversation to start. So yeah, I very much probably imagine, I'm not really looking for my wife or even a long-term girlfriend right now, but I imagine that when I do, they'll probably be American.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, and then I have to decide, do I want my children to grow up in America or the UK or somewhere else? I don't know yet. I've got a lot of research to do.
It's a difficult conversation to have that. I choose to live in the UK. I've lived in a number of other countries, and I have yet to find somewhere which feels so safe with the benefits that come with living in a very stable, highly cultured first world nation with, free universal healthcare, streets you can walk which are entirely safe anywhere in the country generally. There's a lot to be said for the UK, but then I like America. But again, there is a lot of contrast in America, isn't there? I know poor Americans, their quality of life isn't great. But if you can afford to live somewhere like Colorado, Denver, somewhere up there where it's absolutely glorious, or Oregon, one of my other favorite states in America, there's so many beautiful natural sort of places to live in the States that out sort of, they're much bigger hitters than the UK. I could imagine living in some of those places.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good position to be in, though. You've got a good choice to make at some point.
That's true, yes. And I'm trying to experience as much of America as I can right now. I probably will stay in Chicago for a while just because, as you've done this yourself, when you move around from place to place every couple of years, eventually you get a little bit sick of it. And you think, oh, I would actually quite like to just stay somewhere and not pack up everything into a box every 2 years. I'd actually like to maybe buy this furniture knowing that I'll keep it for slightly longer than 18 months. So yeah, I would like to stay here for a little while. What was it about Somerset that ended up being home to you?
My wife, my wife was from here. I'd lived here as well. I'd lived here for 2 years in this actual town because I'd been based here in the RAF. My first posting was here. So when I met my wife and she was from here, I had that sort of connection anyway. And when we got married, she'd always lived in this small sort of village, which was very rural. When you see me in my videos, that's land that we own. So it's all very sort of private, pleasant. It's really idyllic, really, from where I grew up in a small coal mining town in Wales. This is the sort of exact opposite of it in many respects. So yeah, I'm very settled here. But like you say, when you move around, I spent 10 years traveling around, and there's nothing like home. There's nothing like coming home. Even if you've been to the nicest place in the world, on your way back, the feeling of coming home is, something that can't be beat.
Yeah, I'm trying to create that for myself, really, because my parents, they actually live in Spain now, as many people of their age from the UK do. So my sense of home is a little bit more of a feeling than a particular place, because obviously I don't go back to my childhood home, and the place that they live now, I never lived there myself. And my family is quite small. I have a grandma, she's 94, still going. But apart from her, I don't have too much family connections in the UK. So I'm trying to make it as much as possible in the US to be my home.
being a noble sort of a global nomad. You've got a lot, and
Yeah.
of course, the States is an interest because it's, as you say, it's like 50 separate countries all stuck together, really, isn't it? I mean,
Hmm.
I was never always deeply surprised when you go from the sort of East Coast to the West Coast to the sort of central states where they're not glamorous at all. The places that nobody ever goes to. They were some of my favorite trips. Places like New Mexico. It's not really on the beaten path for tourists, but actually I had some wonderful times there because it wasn't on the beaten path for tourists, and you could see a bit of real Americana. Those are the places I really enjoyed. Not so much the big cities,
Hmm.
not at all. But you've got a lot of time to play with.
Yeah, that's true. A road trip is definitely on the agenda whenever I get the time. The problem with having a YouTube channel, as I'm sure you know, is it becomes a bit of a second job.
It does. It does. I mean, to be honest, for me, it started off as a minor hobby.
Yeah.
Now, I work part time, so I'm semi-retired. I've got
Okay.
two. I work for two charities. So I,
Sure.
I sort of work for two military charities, and next year I'm thinking about knocking that down just to one because the YouTube thing, although it's not financially lucrative, I mean, nobody can make a living out of it unless you're like Antonio. I know he employs like 12 people, doesn't he? Sort of writing his comments for him. But for people at my level, and you're going to way surpass where I am. I mean, you'll be up in the hundreds of thousands soon. I'm sure you will, with the audience sort of you're playing to. But it's a little bit of fun. But now I'm coming to a point where I enjoy the fun. I enjoy investing my time in it. And like yourself, you probably found this when you're researching a subject for something that you're going to talk about. And if you want to talk about it with conviction and genuine knowledge, you've got to sort of do that. You've got to invest your time in it. I'm learning things now at this stage of my life that I'd never known before.
Mm.
And it's deeply enriching and enjoyable. So it's given me more than I've ever given to it. I would say YouTube. It's such a positive way to spend your time.
I completely agree. It's definitely upgraded my lifestyle and my own mindset in ways that I never would have done before. Because, as you said, not only do you have to research it and make something interesting for people to watch, but you also have to live the life. And when I look back at my oldest videos, which I hope nobody does, but even though it's only 7 months ago, I look at them and think, wow, I'm like a completely different person back then. And I wouldn't have changed so much if it weren't for this channel, because it's like a very publicly accountable type of growth. It's like, you ever been in those gyms where the treadmills are against the window and people are walking past you on the street? It's like that. It's like having somebody watching you do things at all times. And obviously you're watching yourself as well, and you improve your speaking skills and your presentation. So it's been incredibly valuable to me. I mean, it's the best thing I've ever done, personally. This, moving to America and doing this, are the two things that I'm so happy that I actually decided to do one day.
Well, I'm sure you're only in the infancy of your growth on YouTube because I think you've got quite a remarkable future ahead of you. I mean, I'm an old dude who's fading away, really, but you're a young guy who's got the future because I think YouTube is only in its beginning. I mean, it's never going to decrease from the stage it's at now. It's going to become more and more popular. It's outlasted anything anywhere near it. So, you've staged a good foothold. You're going to go on to great things. I mean, if you look at Antonio and the guys who were there at the very beginning, who've got millions of subscribers today, I'm sure the ceiling of your future is limitless. It depends on how much effort you want to put into it.
Oh, thank you very much, Ash. I hope you're right. But it's been a lot of fun so far. And as I'm sure you know, it's very rewarding as well when you read the comments or emails from people, or for me, a lot of Instagram messages just explaining that your channel has helped them. And it's something that you sometimes, when you make the videos, you don't realize that people really watch them. Even though you see the views, you don't really think about, oh, imagine there's an audience of 10,000 people looking at this. And then when you receive a personal message, it reminds me, not only do I do this for fun, but it reminds me I'm actually doing something quite good here.
Oh yeah, it keeps you
Yeah,
accountable, doesn't it? I
it
mean,
does indeed.
about a year ago, I kind of pivoted a bit away from style, and
Mm.
I started talking more about well-being. So what I would describe as lifestyle stuff these days. talking about managing stress, because it is something I do in my day job. It's something, I'm a well-being trainer, so I feel sort of
Right.
semi-qualified to talk about it. But I just uh, I talk about the things that I've done in my life to make my life a more enjoyable journey. And as you say, you will get a message from somebody who will blurt something out that, something they took a kernel of what you said and they were able to make their lives a little better. And you think, oh, it was a throwaway comment for me, but actually it was something significant to another person. And it does give you a sort of warm, fuzzy feeling that you're doing something constructive. It's not, just bluff, is it? It's something which can be valuable.
Absolutely. And I think probably more people of my generation have this perception of a YouTuber or as an influencer, kind of like a modern version of a celebrity. But for me, and I'm sure for you, it was never really about vanity metrics of followers or to gain status. It was just about, for me, I wanted to create things that I didn't really see out there. And I watched guys like yourself, Antonio, Gentleman's Gazette, but I wanted to see somebody my age talking about these things as well. And like yourself, my earlier videos were very much about style, but these days, not so much, because firstly, there's only so much you can really say about style. You get to diminishing returns once you get past a certain point. And I think there is more to say about the lifestyle of being a gentleman or a chap and what that means.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a never-ending bounty of subjects to talk about.
It is,
Whereas
yes.
style, there's only so many ways you can talk about polishing a pair of shoes or tying a tie knot, although some channels will repeat it over and over and over again. But yeah, I mean, it's the stuff between the lines, really, which is valuable for gentlemen on their journey to chap nirvana. Because we're all on the journey. It doesn't matter who you are, how much wealth you've got, what your educational background is. It's how you get from point A to point B, and by sharing, it's the best way to do it. And
Mhm.
it's a privilege to be able to play a small part in other people's lives, I think, that I never thought would be afforded to me. I mean, YouTube gives you a platform to share with others. And like you say, I mean, it came to me late. I think I was 49 when I started doing YouTube, but I
Mhm.
can see it being part of my life for the foreseeable future now. As I'm an old dude charting my decline into later life, I see it there now.
Well, it's a great platform potentially, but at the start you can be doing it for a while and think, is anybody ever going to watch this? I mean, I don't think I had really I don't think I had 1,000 subscribers about 3 months in, and there was probably the first 4 to 6 weeks I had 3 subscribers. There was me on my other account, my girlfriend at the time, and a woman called Barbara. And Barbara was like a third person in our relationship or in my life. I'd do something ungentlemanly or, drop something and go, "Oh, what would Barbara think of this?" And then eventually it became more than just Barbara. But I hope that it's clear from my videos, and I imagine you take this perspective as well, of I'm on a journey that I'm sharing with you. I'm not trying to present myself as this finished product, because I think I held off from doing it for a long time because I thought, well, I'm not really this person yet that I want to be, and I should do this when I am. And then you realize that actually you never are, and you just have to share that journey.
No, in my early videos, I dressed up specifically
Hmm.
for the videos. I would, put my nicest clothes on. These days, I've increasingly allowed myself to be seen in my videos dressed as I do normally, because I do not wear a suit and a blazer every day. I live in rural Somerset.
Yeah.
I would be ostracized as a weirdo if I did. On my trips to London, I always dress up, but I don't date today. So I'm increasingly showing the real me in my videos now, dressing sort of a little more casually. Sometimes it goes against the grain, but I want to be reflective of the audience. And if the audience thinks that I'm swanning around wearing a dinner jacket on a regular basis, I don't want people to think that that is normal, because that isn't normal. There are unless you're a member of the royal family, your daily life does not involve wearing a suit. So, normally, all the time. So I'm trying to be a little bit more reflective. I mean, I do admit every so often, I was in London last week and I was walking across Hyde Park. Thank God I was wearing a suit. But a chap came bounding up to me and he said, "Oh, Ash, I watched your channel," and shook my hand
Yeah.
and all that sort of thing. It happens very, very rarely. But I thought, oh, thank God I was dressed well, because I'd hate to let
Yeah.
the sort of image slip.
It's happened to me the first time somebody recognized me from my channel. This was very early on. I only had about 6,000 subscribers, but I was in the gym. I was at LA Fitness, and I try and do an elegant version of gym attire, but it's never going to be the thing that you really want to be seen in. So the gym was the first one, and then luckily ever since I've always been well dressed. But I think I hope that people aren't listening to this when I say this, but if I ever go out looking a little less polished than I hope, I always think, please let this not be the time that somebody recognizes me from my videos. Because also living in downtown Chicago, I'm passing a very high volume of people. So it's much more likely that somebody would see me than it would be if I lived anywhere else. Even though I have relatively a small audience, you think, what are the odds of somebody knowing my channel? But it does happen, and it's always very strange when it does. Yeah.
It does, yeah. I dread to think what it must be like for the guys who've got 2 and 3 million subscribers. It must be quite daunting leaving the house.
It is, but it's a good kind of fame at that level, because generally the only people that know you are fans of yours. It's not like your face is plastered over the sun every other week, and half the people that see you shout obscenities on the street. Generally, people who recognize you are going to actually want to shake your hand and get a photo. So
absolutely,
there are much worse ways to be well known.
Indeed.
Well, Ash, I really enjoyed talking with you. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know the story of your life, your perspective on being a gentleman or a chap, and a little bit of information about the world of dating as well.
Well, I do my best to share news.
So thank you very much for joining me. Is there anything else you wanted to say, or where people can find you on YouTube?
No, truly, James, it's been a pleasure to meet you. I know you're sort of younger than half my age, but it's great to see a younger fellow who has the sensibilities and the sort of mindset, which for me ensures that the chap ideology will go forward. And it's particularly pleasant because you're British, obviously. So keeping it with the same flag.
Well, almost Welsh, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Even better. Yeah. God's country. But no, I mean, if any guys want to pop over and see me at the Chap's Guide, I'll entertain you with my style of, the gentleman's journey through life. But thanks for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ash. It's been a pleasure. Take care.